Good evening, everyone. It's your boy Malik Washington. How you all doing this fine day or evening, wherever you all reside in the world today? I hope that all is well and that you all are achieving all of your endeavors or whatever it is that you're attempting to get into these days. I don't know what people are actually into. I don't know if they're stuck in their own world or if they're caught up on world events or if they even care about world events at all. It's probably a little bit of everything in the book, to be honest, because of how diverse this world is. But nonetheless, we are all complex human beings. I'm sure everyone can do a little bit of everything at the same time, depending on, you know, what you're into and what you like. Today, funny thing is, I was this episode was actually supposed to have been recorded like literally the day before yesterday, but I got preoccupied with other matters, so decided to go on ahead and get it today before it slipped my mind, and I end up sitting up here pretending like I really was going to get stuff done when really I wasn't going to be able to do this episode like I wanted to because of my other matters I was preoccupied with. Also, hope you guys had a great St. Patrick's holiday or whatever, whoever celebrates it, whoever observes it. Um, I typically don't observe holidays on the usual, but I don't know, because I do have a background of Irish within me. Obviously, going back, so many generations ago, starting from the time of when my ancestors were slaves to a couple of Irish slave masters, along with Scottish slave masters. Of course, we ended up inheriting the Irish lineage. But again, that's just an historical anecdote, an historical truth. It is what it is. What happens, happens. Obviously, I don't necessarily agree with how things transpire, as I always say when we're having these conversations about slavery. But I don't believe in pigeonholing myself to just one particular ethnicity, despite who my parents are and despite how I grew up. I do believe we all are genetically modified the way that we are because of who we directly descend from. And it would be disingenuous of me to deny the Irish part of me, given that it is a part of my lineage, my pedigree. So I don't mind observing it. It's something that, it's just something that if you want to indulge in, you have the ability to do so. I immerse and believe in every aspect of my being, no matter what ethnic group it is. I never personally claim to be Irish or be Scottish or any of these different things, but they're in my DNA. And I don't mind acknowledging them and acknowledging that they're there and that I am also a part of those people just as much as I am a part of being black, even though that's most of my genetic makeup. But that's just me, right? I live in America. I'm a part of a melting pot. I think a lot of black people should just embrace who they are, despite what their uh, the unfortunate historical history that gave way to them being that of a part of that ethnic group. But nonetheless, the people of yesteryear are not the people of today. I think a lot of people from I think a lot of people of that background who are Irish or even Scottish or whatnot. I don't think a lot of people agreed with what happened back then. At least I hope not. And if they do, then I can't change the hearts of man, which is funny because we're going to segue into a topic concerning that. But nonetheless, I don't, I can't change the heart of a man or a woman to feel how they want to feel about another person's race. At the end of the day, I'm a human being. I can't help how I'm made up. You can't help how you're made up. But we can go back and forth about who's better and who is and who isn't, depending on the conversation that we're having and in what context. But nonetheless, I think it's a stupid conversation to have. We all have our ups and downs. We all have things about ourselves we do and don't like. And if that's something that bothers you, then that's something you have to work out within your heart. Me personally, I try to love any and everybody that loves me. I try to respect anybody that loves me. Even if you don't, I try to respect you. But of course, I would never tolerate anybody disrespecting me for the sake of disrespect. But if we can come to middle ground, I certainly don't mind doing that. So That being said, going into that little rant, overall, I just hope everyone had a good time in whatever holidays they choose to observe or whatever that case may be. For me, celebrating St. Patrick's Day was just an acknowledgement of my heritage dating back to my ancestors like Isaac Dockery, who was a brick mason in Louisville. No, not Louisville, sorry, Sevierville, Tennessee, along with his wife, Charlotte Thomas, who also was a biracial woman under the the Thomas slave masters, as well as the Massengills. But neither here nor there. I want to dive right on into the topic. I'm actually going to combine these two. They were going to be two separate episodes, but I'm like, well, they're kind of short. There's not really a lot for me to say about one of them. The other one is going to be a little extensive, which is more of the biblical portion of it. So it's going to be politics and and the spiritual combined, if that makes sense, right? So this episode is going to be understanding, for one, Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 13. The other component of it is going to be concerning talks about pardoning Derek Chauvin and my thoughts on the matter. So that's pretty much the gist of this episode. So I'm going to start off with talking about Derek Chauvin, right? For those of you that may have forgotten, or if you don't know, some years back, at the dawn of Black Lives Matter, there was a horrible incident that had happened with an encounter between a police officer named Derek Chauvin, and a criminal named George Floyd. At the time, before all the evidence came out that he was a criminal, obviously we did not know who this guy was. He was just a average Joe. However, there was a clip that was released, and it showed at the time a police officer that had his knee on the neck of a man named George Floyd. George Floyd was apparently arrested because he ended up giving a counterfeit $20 bill to the cash register, to the cashier. The cashier called the police. The police came. Obviously, Derek Chauvin was on the scene along with his Asian partner, and I think there were some other people that came later on too, right? But essentially, they were escorting the man out of the store because obviously, he was committing fraud and giving the cashier a false $20 bill. George Floyd was being erratic. He was a bit manic, but then he started to panic because apparently he kept complaining that he could not breathe. Derek Chauvin arrests him. Derek Chauvin lays him on the ground along with his partner. They compressed his chest to the asphalt. Derek Chauvin was complaining that he could not breathe even prior to having his knee George Floyd was complaining that that he could not breathe, in spite of the fact that Derek Chauvin had his knee on his neck, and despite also being handcuffed for a long period of time. Derek Chauvin continued to have his knee on the man's neck. It was approximately 9 minutes that he had done this. And so this led to a lot of upheaval, a lot of people complaining and being upset and being angry. I too was one of those people. Before all the information came out, I was highly upset about what transpired, because even though I never experienced what happened during Jim Crow, obviously I wasn't born during that time. I've never experienced slavery. I've never experienced Jim Crow. Have I experienced elements of racism, of someone calling me the N-word? This was like a long time ago, but yes, I've been called that before. But so have I been called it by black people as well. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that even though I have never experienced those things, it made me feel, I was filled with anger at that time, because I was coming even off of a period where I was finally starting to acknowledge that, just like anybody else, white people were actually kind and decent people. And so you're probably like, well, what do you mean? Well, I'm going to tell you that there was a time I used to actually hate white people. And that was because of based off how I've read into a lot of information of the past. I looked into a lot of things related to African American. In fact, I studied African American and African history and colonization, pre-colonization, everything that led up to it, the mindsets of some of the racists back then, how they perceived black people, the stereotypes that came along with it, what we had to undergo just to get some semblance of equality from the others, from our white counterparts. All of that came into play, and it pissed me off. I dare to think that if anybody has some type of epic of history of oppression within within their families, or even within a group or race in and of itself, anybody would be upset and be like, why are these people doing us like this? Why did they colonize us like this? What was the purpose and intent behind it? And again, nothing any of us can do about it now because we're so far into the future. And history has shown that we're obviously trying to grow from that tumor or cancer. It's not really a tumor anymore at this point. It's just pure cancer. From that cancer that spread it all over the United States, damn near to the point to where it led to them mistreating human beings in the most egregious, draconian, devilish way possible, to the point to where we get sold. And we are no exception to have being slaves. Every group, every race, including white people themselves, have been enslaved to somebody. But does that make slavery okay? Absolutely doesn't. Not in my humble opinion, anyway. But with the way the ancient cultures were back then, and transitioning into the past 150, 275 years of which we experienced slavery, we've grown from it. We've grown to realize how cancerous that practice was. And even some of the people, even during that time period, questioned their beliefs and how they followed after their gods and their Bibles, because they were in, we were, oh, and even how they even believed in the Constitution. Because it's like, if we're claiming that every man is equal, but yet we're enslaving every man, how does that make us equals? If I own him and he's my slave, he's my property, there's no way that that person is considered equal under the eyes of God, and I own him or her. So all of that came into play, and I hated white people for it. And did I have every right to hate them for it? Of course, because who loves evil if they believe in doing the right, if they believe in doing righteous things? Who loves that? Even the scriptures itself says oppression makes a wise man mad. Why? And if I realize as a wise man that this is evil, why would I not acknowledge and call out that evil? Of course I am. But if I'm going to deduce that the only way to continuously show my hate for it is to then exude that same hatred towards those people, calling them racist, calling them this and calling them that, and then I'm exuding racism, that's not going to help the situation. But when I got when I got into college and I start actually engaging white people personally, I've engaged white people even before college, to be frank with you. But my awakening from my hatred personally came when I got out of college and I started actually looking at white people with my own eyes, and I realized they actually are not those people. And in fact, a lot of them oppose it. Conservative and liberal indifference. They opposed it. It was wrong. We don't believe in it. We just believe in humanity. We want to, respect you. And not to say that we'll ever be equal, but we can respect each other's differences and still be cool, still be friends. What happened back then, that wasn't our fault. And of course, some would argue that they still benefit from the privilege of it, but who can help what their ancestors did? They can't soul transfer and make their ancestors stop owning slaves. They can't, they can't soul transfer into their ancestors and make their ancestors like black people. And vice versa for us for after everything they did to us. You can't make them unhate what was done to them because that was a lot of damage. Removal of language, removal from their lineage, removal from who their people were. We can blame the Africans over there for that too, not just the Europeans. But nonetheless, that's what happened. Looking at the Derek Chauvin situation, it kind of made me remind me of the different pictures I saw from back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s of how black people were treated by whites. And I'm like, oh, hell no. I know that we're not about to refer to this. I know, and that's my first time ever seeing it in my life. After seeing that, I wanted to whoop Derek Chauvin's ass. I wanted to get him up off of George Floyd, and I wanted to pound him. I really did. Right in his face. Deface him, disfigure him in every single way, because why are you doing that, sir? Get off of his neck. I dare to believe we all felt that way to a certain extent. We wanted to do something about it. You may not have wanted to pound him, but you certainly wanted to get him off of his neck after so long. And what did he do so heinous to where you just have him just sitting there like that, like he's an animal? He's already in handcuffs. He's saying that he can't breathe. He's calling out to his mother. So he was definitely in a state where he was about to pass on, because now he's afraid. He's afraid. He's confused. His body is probably going through all kinds of weird sensations because he's about to go into that period where his mind he's losing his mind. He's panicking. And at some point he did eventually lose his life. Now, what's so strange about the whole thing is his Asian partner later on came out and said he tried to tell Derek Chauvin to let go of him so that they could treat him properly. Derek Chauvin at some point did, but it was after the 9-minute period. And they did try to give him aid, but at that time it was too late. Now, reason why I brung all of this up is because it was alleged that and this has nothing to do with the left this time, strangely enough. This is about the right. Now I'm getting on the right. Because again, I told you, I'm independent. I can look at both sides and call it down the middle. If I see something doesn't make sense here, I'm going to call it like I see it. Right is right and wrong is wrong. There are some people, not all right-wingers, but there are some right-wingers who are calling for the pardoning of Derek Chauvin. Even some prominent YouTubers are doing the same thing. And their argument is that because, according to the toxicology report, Derek Chauvin was not the direct cause of George Floyd's death, and there was pre-existing conditions that existed within George Floyd. Therefore, we should not keep Derek Chauvin in prison any longer, and he should now be able to be released. He should be pardoned. Of course, some people had some strong disagreements. Some people believed it was based off, these implications was based off the fact that this was a black man. And clearly they were in defense of a white man coming out this and not holding him accountable for anything that he's done wrong. I could go down that path and look at it that way too. And for some people, maybe it is based off that, because I have not heard from in any other instances of this happening, of them attempting to try to pardon people for making wrongful arrest, or doing it in such a forceful way that they're not looking at it as, well, this officer should be held accountable, because despite being told by his partners, we need to give him aid, he's saying he can't breathe, and you had your knee on his neck, on his vertebrae, for approximately 9 minutes. That should be held account. You should be held accountable for that. You may not have been the direct cause of it, but you certainly were a contributing factor to it. And Derek Chauvin was listed on there as has been a contributing factor to his death. It's not to say he was the ultimate cause of it. And I understand you saying he should be pardoned based off of the fact that George Floyd died from pre-existing conditions along with the drugs that was in his system. But to then leave Derek Chauvin out of it as if Derek Chauvin didn't do anything wrong is asinine. Because then my question is going forward for any officer, whether if they were black or white, indifference, are we then opening the can of worms to say that you can hold a man down for 9 minutes, put your knee on his neck like he's an animal, despite the fact you got one partner that's holding both ankles of his feet to the ground. You got another one, and if I'm not mistaken, there was another officer that had their knee on his lower back, and then on top of that, you got Derek Chauvin's knee on his vertebrae. That's overkill. He should stay in jail for that. He should not come out, and he should do the time that he was given. He should. And the fact that that's something that some of these people were even putting up a petition to get an X amount of signatures to get this man out, I think that's absolutely insane. I don't think you should. I don't think he should. Now, Donald Trump, this was asked because Caroline Leavitt, his press secretary, did a press briefing on this because they had asked this question was already brought up to the president, and the president obviously said, "I'm not going to give any consideration to that at this time." Of course, he could do it at any given time. This is not to say that he's going to do it, but it doesn't sound like this is on Donald Trump's list anyway to make this happen. I don't think it's a smart move in the first place to even tap into that, because at the end of the day, that man did do something wrong in the situation. He should be held accountable for that. Not for being a primary cause, but for being a contributing factor, adding to the damage. Why even some are even considering that, I do not know. I personally, again, don't think he should be pardoned. If he is pardoned, I don't think it's right. And I think that it's setting the precedent that officers, that despite it being overkill and you already had him on the ground, chest compressed, he can't breathe, he's calling out to his mother. I don't think that officers going forward should be allowed to do that. And him, Derek Chauvin, being put in that position is a perfect example to say, going forward, no officer can do any man like this. Now, I'm not a fan of George Floyd. I don't idolize George Floyd. George Floyd was a criminal. Outside of the $20 counterfeit bill, he did some things. And this is public information. You can go look up George Floyd's record. He's done things to black people. Wrongful things at that. He's even put a gun up to a pregnant woman's stomach before. I think it was even to either his girlfriend, his wife, or something like that. But yeah, he's done those things. This man is not somebody to revere. And the fact that black people made murals and busts and everything like that of him, like as if he was somebody to be, like he was the poster child for police brutality, the poster adult for police brutality, that's a problem. I don't think we had to go that far with it to make a point that this man was victimized. And some people were willing to do that. But me personally, I'm like, no, it's not that serious. He was wrongfully treated and arrested during that period. But it's not enough to go as far as giving him an expensive funeral, to putting murals up of the man, putting busts of him up. He wasn't some upstanding figure. Was Trayvon Martin given that kind of attention? Breonna Taylor? No, they weren't. Not to the point to where you put bust up in the city for all to look at and be in awe of. But for some strange reason, they were able to do that, which was the weirdest thing in the world to me. It was a conundrum. But that's the way of this world. It's like we're creating these golden calves out of people that are undeserving of it. They shouldn't be deserving of it at all, because This is a man that got victimized as a result of having drugs, well, he got victimized because somebody didn't do their job properly. But moreover, he was a criminal. I don't believe in that. But the bottom line here is Derek Chauvin should not be exonerated of his crime simply because pre-existing conditions existed within George Floyd or because he had drugs in his system. He still contributed to the wrong. You can't exonerate one wrong and then condemn the other. That doesn't make sense. A lesser sentence for it, perhaps. But to completely rid him of it, discharge him of it, no, absolutely not. He should remain. And I'm glad that Donald Trump is not even thinking about even dealing with that. That's silly. So I'll leave that right there. The other conversation, we're going to now switch over to the other hand, which is about Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 13. I told you earlier, this is going to segue into the topic about the change, about not changing the heart of a person on what they believe in, right? Or what they think about people. The book of Ecclesiastes chapter 7:13, and for those of you that don't know, Ecclesiastes is basically a book of literature. Uh, sorry, it's a book of adages or books of wisdoms, proverbs, you name it. Uh, basically from, I forget which period it is. A lot because a lot of scholars argue that it came later during the Persian period, that there was a significant amount of Aramaic language because the rabbinic tradition holds that the book of Ecclesiastes was written by the Jews. I'm sorry, it was written by Solomon. Some argued that it was in Solomon's old age. Another argues that it was from Solomon of a later years, probably during the Jews' captivity under the Persians or something along those lines. So it's neither here nor there about that. But nonetheless, the only thing you need to know, it was a book of wisdom, a book of adages that was written to basically uh, give people imparting words from one wise man to the next about the ways of this world. And you could say it ties into a little bit of everything about God, about time, about people, about a little bit of everything, right? Imparting that wisdom. Most people contribute, obviously, the book of Ecclesiastes to Solomon, but again, it's up for debate depending on who you speak to about it. But Ecclesiastes 7:13 stands out because it says something in particular that I don't believe many believers take into consideration when they're going out and they're trying to propagate the word of God to people, or people in general don't take into account the way God works when he's dealing with and interacting with mankind, when he's engaging mankind. And it's just a form of wisdom I think one could take and say, you know what, I can probably understand humanity a lot better if I had this approach, this line of questioning in my way of thinking about God as I'm reading about him in the Bible. Because for the most part, what you see within people is a lot of people love to talk about the one-sided good nature of the creator, the one-sided blessing nature of the creator, the God who gives to all, forgives all, wants to see you do better, wants you to come to him, wants you to pray to him every day, wants you to do all these different things, right? All this good stuff. Teaching you that Jesus is going to come back and he's going to rise you up. He's going to bring you into the kingdom of heaven. A lot of people thinking, even from the people of yesteryear who have passed on, some people assume that their loved ones are in heaven. But stranger things are written in the Bible to where that could not necessarily be true because, well, these people have not been judged yet. And if they're already in heaven, then why are there two forms of judgment in the Bible where God will rise you up And you won't know whether if you're in the first or second judgment, but yet you're claiming that your loved one is in heaven watching you. But see, yet again, this is something that I don't go into telling people about in real life, because I know people obviously find ways to cope about their loved ones. They feel like their people are watching them, their ancestors are watching them, or they feel like their loved ones are in heaven. People come from different religions, so their pastors and their preachers and uh their caliphates or whoever are teaching them what they're teaching them, and it just can't be helped that they believe what they believe in, and that's what they've been taught. But it's strange because the Bible tells you exactly how these things work. But some people seemingly choose to deny what the scriptures are saying on one hand, but they're willing to believe the other. But that, I believe, is ultimately coming from the fact that some of these leaders are misleading their flock. They're misleading their sheep, and they're not telling their sheep the actual dual reality of the Most High. Where the prophets talk about it all the time. God can do both good as well as evil. God can heal and he can make sick. God can he can debase and then he can rise you up. God can give you blessings, but he can also make it hard for your plans to go forth. Like the scripture says that man has many plans, but the Lord's will always prevail. So you can continuously try to come up with a plan or say you're going to do this and say you're going to do that. And God can easily command that that's not going to happen. And it's going to be difficult for you to make it happen, especially if the Creator is standing as an obstacle in your path. But to give you a clear indication of what I mean, a lot of times us as believers, this is a component of us that I find quite strange. A lot of us, many times, we want certain human beings who obviously come to Christ, right? We want them to come to Christ. We want them to come to God. We want them to change their souls. We want them to repent. We want them to do a lot of different things. Even within our families, we have people who do some heinous, freaky, nasty, disgusting things. We know about them. Some of you listening to this know about some people that do some basically humanistically flawed things that they should not do. And a lot of times you try to warn them. They don't listen. A lot of times you try to stand in their way. You try to intervene. You even pray for them. They still continue to do the same thing. And you find it a conundrum as to why your prayers, why your actions, why your words of wisdom, no matter what you do, why isn't it working? Why isn't this person's soul coming forth to the Creator? Why aren't they listening to what I have to say? How come it's not working in my favor, even though I want what's best for them? You ever heard the adage from some people, from not even from some people? I think it's an old saying, though, that you can't want more for others than others want for themselves. Well, in this instance, that's kind of the case, right? People come from all different walks of life. We're all seeds, and we're all planted a certain way. And sometimes some seeds, no matter how much you nurture them, they'll grow, but they're not going to grow the way that you want them to grow. There will be some seeds that will grow, and based off your nurturing, they'll flourish, they'll prosper, they'll do the right thing. There are some that no matter how much you nurture them or how little you nurture them, they're just going to do what they want to do. And these are sort of the more wayward seeds. These seeds they sprout like weeds. They do what they want to do. And the funny thing is, when they grow, they don't grow for prospering others or blessing others. They grow to destroy. Y'all know, even for a perfect example with weeds and gardening, you can grow as many tomato plants, jalapeno plants, eggplants, carrots, you name it, as much as you want. But if weeds are abound, if weeds are nearby and they grow in and around the territory of your garden bed, I can promise you they're going to tear up your plants. They're going to mess up the growth of your plants. In fact, they'll kill them if you don't cut them. And if you don't cut them to the root, they're just going to keep growing back. Weeds in general are just going to keep growing back. And we don't plant them. They just keep growing because that's just the way nature works. But if we plant our plants in and around those things, they destroy. And a lot of times all we can do is prune or remove those things away from our garden bed so that they don't destroy the leftover plants that are attempting to grow the right way. No matter what you try to do to the weeds, no matter how you feel about weeds, no matter how much you try to care and nurture a weed, guess what a weed is going to do? It's going to destroy any and everything in its path. So looking at a person, compare a person to a weed. People, some of them, most of them actually, a lot of them are stuck in their ways. A lot of them are very destructive. A lot of them are raised in environments that make them into horrible people, nasty people, damn near demonic. Some people, you ever look at some people, they look like they have no life in their eyes? Those types. And when you talk to them long enough, you start to realize how screwed up their logic is about a lot of things in life. If you're just trying to, even from a psychological standpoint, if you're just trying to understand a killer, if you're trying to understand a liar, if you're trying to understand a pedophile, if you're trying to understand a thief, a kleptomaniac, if you're trying to understand the flawed humanity in some people, it often makes you wonder, why are they like this? And why is it that no matter what you do for them, they won't change? You know how even in the justice system, liberals or leftists believe in the concept of rehabilitative justice? And yet some of these people they try to rehabilitate into coming back out into society and doing the right thing. All these same offenders do is just go back and repeat the same crime just to go back to the jail. They're going right back to the jail complex. And yet there are some people like leftists that believe in rehabilitating these people. Yeah, that doesn't work for some people. Some people's souls are just not like that. And it often makes you wonder why. The book of Ecclesiastes chapter 7:13 denotes, it says, what God has, who can bend, I'm sorry, who can straighten or who can make straight what God has made crooked. So I'll say that again. The line of questioning is, who can make straight what God has made crooked? Now, very interesting, because when you're looking at the Bible for what it is, a lot of things in life, if you think about it, they have a certain nature to them, right? And the Bible inquires things to make you think about your line of thinking about how you may perceive God. Who can change the stripes on a zebra? Who can change the spots of a leopard? Who can change the weight of an elephant? Who can change the aggressive nature of a lion? Right? Who can make animals be merciful? Who can make darkness light and light darkness? These types of questions make you think about the ways of the world, the ways of people. Ecclesiastes chapter 7:13 inquires that, it is a general concept. Well, who can make straight what God has made crooked? And you say to yourself, well, why would God make these things crooked? Well, it's no different than how God makes rats bottom feeders, how God makes apex predators consume a lot of things that could potentially be an invasive species. There's a lot of complex reasonings for why certain things are made. And you wonder about people who are crooked. Well, why would God make some of these people crooked? Well, In a lot of ways, God is often trying to show his power through people. Most people don't realize that the creator actually is a being that is dual minded. He's complex, but just as much as he can do good, he can establish foundations of evil as well. He can make people go into their own way. He can set them in their own ways to the point to where it will be even difficult for them to come back to him. But he sets them that way to set a precedent, even for those of us who follow him. No matter what we do for a person, no matter how much we pray, no matter how much we want that person to repent and change their ways and all these different things, some people are just not meant to come back to the Creator. They're just not. We see it all throughout the Bible of that happening. A perfect example would be in the book of Lamentations, where the prophet Jeremiah prayed and he cried and asked the Lord to change the hearts of Israel because Israel was falling into idolatry. And God delayed in speaking to Jeremiah. But then at some point, an angel came down. I think the angel, was it Gabriel? It was one of the messengers. But essentially, they told him that he heard his prayer, heard him very well. But what he essentially was trying to explain was, I've heard them. I hear you. And I heard your cry. But lament for them no more. And this is the Creator talking directly to him through his angel. Do not cry for them anymore because their hearts are far from me. They have been given they have given their hearts unto idolatry. These Israelites have willingly chose to go against me, have willingly chose to not speak of me anymore, but go unto other things that matter to them, go unto other idols or gods that they deem better than me. Therefore, I will turn my back on Israel, and I will not hear their cries when they come to me for help. Now imagine, you as the person that wants to intervene and you want to interject and you want to pray and ask for God to change these people's hearts. He suddenly gives you that answer. And you say, wow, you who have the belief that God is this forgiving being and just willy-nilly just goes around and just wants everyone to change, just passively. That's not how this works. You see, some people in the world choose to just not worship the Creator, and that's fine. Some people willingly choose to go against the Creator, and that's fine. You want your son to stop practicing homosexuality, but that's what he wants to do. You want your daughter to stop going around and having sex with a whole bunch of different men, but that's what she wants to do. You want your uncle to stop being on drugs, but he seems to keep going back to it. That's what he wants to do. Some people, yes, will come back, but you can't change the heart of every man and woman. You can't save those that don't want to be saved. That's just the way life is. Some people have been molded because of the way that their life has been, the environment they've been around, the way that they have been established. Some wretches are going to just be wretches, and God will use them all the same at their very nature to be examples for people. Some it will be because it's an example of what not to do in life. Some to be examples of what to do. The Bible even discusses it in this way when it says, what if God does this in order to show himself, to show his countenance by making vessels of mercy and making vessels of destruction? What if God made them to be destroyed at some point, to be destroyed? What if God made some at some point to be merciful? And if he did do it, who's going to stop him? This is a conversation that you have never heard. You may have never even thought about. You may even say, well, then what's the point? Well, the point being is, ladies and gentlemen, you have a choice. You always have a choice. Everybody has a choice. You don't have to be that way. But some willingly choose to. And if they do, maybe God led them that way on purpose. Maybe God established them that way because it's to show you this is what you don't want to do. And for others, it's to show what they can do. They can do it, but he can take you out at any given time. The script, even Yeshua said, if the righteous make it even by the skin of their teeth, then what of the wicked? So you can imagine them having crooked hearts and them not being able to change it because God is leading them down that path. That's a hell of a path to go down. But some people can escape that if they so choose. Yes, you can ask them to repent. You can ask them to do a lot of different things. That does not mean that God is going to allow it. Some people have been given unto those attitudes, those spirits, those ways of thinking. Do we not forget in the Old Testament, God even said, who will go down and make Ahab and turn Ahab into a liar and cause these people to fall into the hands of the enemy? And literally a lying, he was having counsel with his spirit, with his spiritual, with the other spirits. And a lying spirit came forth and said, I will go down and make Ahab a liar and deceive the people to walk them into judgment because he had already judged Ahab and his people. So in order for his will to be done, he was willing to take a liar, a lying spirit, that of which he despises in all ways. But he took the neutral lying spirit, and that spirit was willing to go down and possess Ahab to go deceive the people of Israel, some of the people of Israel, to go into a war where they were going to lose and end up destroying them. Because Ahab obviously did something wrong. There was obviously a whole story behind that, but that's a story for another time. Or what about the time when the Creator hardened the heart of Pharaoh just to show how powerful he was to both Israel and Egypt? So God made Pharaoh harden. He hardened his heart on purpose, made him turn against the Creator, gave Moses a hard time, and yet and still destroyed Egypt. All to prove of how powerful he was. This God is dual-minded. Will do as he pleases. This God is not a pushover. And this God is not anyone's lapdog. And that's what most people miss about the Most High. He's not your lapdog. For as much as you may think he is, he's not. Because I can promise you, if he was a lapdog, and if he was a pushover, I could not worship him. Because like a child to a parent, if I notice that my parents are not actually being my parents, and I know that I can walk over them at any time, and I have this logic in my mind, my parents will just let me do whatever I want. You think I'm going to respect them? Hell no, I'm not going to respect them. Why would I? You give me no boundaries. You tell me what to. You don't tell me what to do or what not to do. You just let me reign my own way. I might as well be God myself. So no, I'm not going to respect you. And the Creator does a lot of crazy things, some of which I don't even understand at the end of the day. But you trust in these judgments and you hope it's for the right reasons. Because at the end of the day, as Scripture says again in the book of Job, when the Most High stretches forth his hand, who's going to stop him? And who's going to come forth and say that God has done this evil thing? And who's going to judge him and put him to death for it? Nobody. Because he's the arbiter of all things. So you who wants everybody to be straight, some people are just going to be crooked, and you have to accept that. And God uses all, whether if you're good or evil, indifference. You, as the person that has the conviction, just has to do better and show people that there is a better way and get those souls that the Most High has ordained to come back to come forth into his fold. Because as the scripture says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malik Washington. I hope you enjoyed this episode. episode 5 of Breaking Mental Barriers. Have a good day or good night wherever you reside. And I thank you for listening if you got this far. Like, subscribe, and comment if you have an opinion. Thank you, people. Good night.